Well, it's just to be so full of all of you and what Kathy directs us to in this service is really the crux of what I was searching for. And I had experiences of that, beautiful experiences of that, but inevitably I would return to an identification of suffering. I didn't look it. I knew how to look because I grew up and entered the hippie phase, and so I knew how to wear my all whites and dance and be happy. But the moment I was alone, or the moment something went wrong, internally or externally, I was suffering. And so my attention turned toward a spiritual search, a true spiritual search, not just the facade of the spiritual search. And I spent some years practicing different traditions, primarily Buddhism, primarily Tibetan Buddhism, and beautiful practice. And I really respect the Tibetans and what they stand for. But I was still wanting something that would save me from the downside. So I would get ecstatic in meditation or in chanting, and then inevitably that would start to ebb, and I would return to my identity of someone who needs something more, or needs what I don't like to be less. So weighing it and working with it and fixing it and having extraordinary moments and realizations throughout all of that. But in 1990, I met an incredible being, my teacher, Sri Punja, we called Papaji. And when I went in to see him and for the first time, and he said, "Welcome," just like that, "Welcome." And he was big man, he was a Punjabi, so he was really big and handsome and looked just like my father, but better. And he said, "Welcome." And I saw this force, and immediately he said, "What do you want?" And somehow the word freedom came up for me. I've been working with someone doing a series of podcasts about my life story, and in retrospect, I can see that's what I always wanted. That's what I was always going for. But somehow I was blind to the name of it until I spoke it in that moment to Papaji. And he said, "Good, you're in the right place." And I knew it was so. Just seeing it in his eyes, I knew this is a real teacher. I didn't know what would come after that. I didn't know if there was a particular ritual or I was supposed to be a particular kind of devotee. I learned very soon that there was none of that. There was no way you were supposed to be, and there were no particular rituals. But he told me, "You're in the right place, so now just sit there and be still." So I had practiced meditation. I thought I knew what sitting there and being still was. So I sat there and I was still, still. And he said, "No, no, 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 not that. That's way too much." Drop your meditation for a moment. He and I agree that meditation is quite wonderful and beautiful for your nervous system, for you settling into the truth of who you are. But there is something even deeper. And that's just simply being still. When I met him, I didn't know what that was. I had practiced being still. And practicing being still meant still was a thing or a state. If I could get myself into a certain state, I could be still, and it was true that it was happiness. There was nothing going on in my mind. I was just in bliss. But because I thought of it as a state or as getting still, I could leave it. It would go. I'd change my posture or change the scenery, and it was gone. And so then I would try to recapture it. And it's a spiritual samsara. It's a wheel. And I didn't know the power of this teacher when I met him, that he was really intent on pushing me off that wheel so that I could at least for a moment. He always said it takes 1/12 of a second to realize the truth of who you are. And that truth is realized in that 1/12 of a second of simply being still, not doing stillness, not acquiring stillness, not holding stillness, as nice as all of that may be. And it had certainly served me up until that moment. In a way, had gotten me to that moment because I had tasted the bounty and the peace of being still, and sometimes the ecstasy. And I wanted more of it, and I kept almost getting more and then losing more, and that was the impetus that got me to him. But he swept all of that away. He said, it's not a state. It's not something you do. It's for one moment, 1 millisecond. You stop doing anything. Really, stop. And recognize what is here. I initially had experienced that with him, and then I started naming what was here. Oneness, unity, peace, beauty, love. Me, I'm here. And he said, just be still. Once he saw me in a meeting and he said, that's it. Now speak that, speak that. And I came out of a no-thingness, and I said, I can't speak it. It's not speakable. And he said, yes, I know, I've heard that. Okay, be quiet then. And then another moment, he saw that I really was still. I really was quiet. And he said, now that you have to speak. I said, but Papaji, when I began speaking it, I'm naming it, I'm capturing it, I'm objectifying it. And he said, that's the truth, that's the truth. Nevertheless, you must try. So soon after that, he invited me to come back. I was in India with him, to come back to the West and to meet those people who were interested, and to simply be with them and share with them my experience and use my experience to answer any questions that may arise in them regarding the truth of who you are. I really thought he had made a mistake because I didn't know the meditation. I really hadn't spent that much time in Indian kind of Sanskrit kind of things. The Tibetans I had been with translated it into Tibetan. And I thought, he's made a mistake, you know. And he said, just trust me, trust your own experience. So it came time for me to leave, and he had given me the name Ganga and told me that people should call me Gangaji. Well, even that, I thought, this is a mistake. I can't go back to tell people to call me Gangaji, you know. And I thought, I just won't use the name. That's all. It wasn't a beautiful name to me. It was beautiful to him because of the goddess Ganga, and he loved the goddess Ganga, and we met on the banks of the Ganga in Rishikesh. And so I just, as what I'm sharing this in this way with you for is to show you how I came into this like, like this, until a moment happened when I was away from him, back in the States, like a thunderclap happened. And all of my resistance was finished in that moment. Such clarity, such simplicity, and such inclusion of all. And in that moment, it meant me and all of my faults, me and all my limitations, me and all of my inabilities to speak something or name something, all just the perfection of being, knowing itself, recognizing itself. And Eli was with me, and we called him on the phone, and at that time it took like easily an hour to get through to India. And he got on the phone, he said, "Well, Gangaji, speak to me." And I said, "I can't speak it." I can't speak it. And he said, "That's right. It can't be spoken. That's the truth. Nevertheless, you must try." And with that, he sent me out into the world. And he said, "You don't have to teach people anything. They already know too much. You just share with them your own realization, and then you open up questions so that from that question you can speak from that realization." Very simple. And he said, "It'll happen naturally. Only those people who are drawn to discovering this immediately will be attracted to you. And just wait and see," he said. And it happened like that. First one person said, "Oh, I feel something." And 5 people, then maybe 20 people, then maybe the next it's 200 people. And then here we are, 34 years later, 35 years later. And it's the same. Especially after a service like this, there's nothing really I can say that you don't already know, that you haven't already glimpsed, that perhaps you live in. But in our conversation, we can serve someone who perhaps has the same question but doesn't even have it formulated. Because the answer to all the questions, every one of them, is right here, in the silence of your being. There can be beautiful sutras and poems and songs and expressions of that. But always it begins and ends in that silence. The most questions I've gotten over these years have been about getting to that silence. Yes, but how do I get there? Yes, but how do I keep it? And that yes, but is, of course, the bell that's bringing you back into the samsara of your own suffering. Because it was here in this morning and is here in this moment. But because we are taught and believe what we are taught, that it's an object, we think my heart is an object, my being is an object, this silence is an object. And so when I move on to the next object, driving my car, seeing somebody I like, seeing somebody I don't like, we think the silence is gone. But if you will stop for 1/12 of a second, whenever you think this silence that is at the core and essence of your being, and you think it has left you or it has gone, you just stop and check what is still here. Everything else comes and goes. good feelings, bad feelings, ecstatic feelings, wretched feelings, states of enlightenment, states of unenlightenment, good health, bad health, feelings of love, feelings of hatred, all of it comes and goes, like the weather, just passes through. But what doesn't come and go? This is the essential inquiry. And this is a tradition of inquiry that began with Ramana Maharshi. We usually bring pictures, so I would bring that up. When I met Papaji, I knew of Ramana Maharshi, but I didn't know his teachings. I had tried to read his very simple little book, and I tossed it aside as being too simple. What does that have to do with me and my complicated life? So it took me 20 years from that moment to meet Papaji when he said, it has everything to do with your life. It is life itself, speaking as silence. So with that, I invite you to bring your question, or if you have a report, up here so that we can engage in a conversation that's actually relevant to your life, not an abstraction of silence and awakening and peace and love. I don't normally speak to people after a service like this, so maybe that's even irrelevant in this moment because you're in a state of bliss. Oh yeah, I'm not leaving. Are you coming forward? Oh, great. Very natural.
My question is, in Papaji's teachings,
Oh,
my question is, in Papaji's teachings, what is, and non-duality, what is the experience of death for us? What is the teaching of
experience of
death? What is the teaching of death?
death. It is the teaching of death. It is a death teaching. Because in a moment of really being silent, you have to die to everything you know. Otherwise, I'm being quiet, but I'm actually still talking the story, talking the history, talking the potential future. So to die to that for a moment is to experience death. And to experience death directly, without a teaching, without anything someone said, but directly, is to experience what does not die. So you recognize in that moment that your name dies, your name is a story, that your body dies, your body is a story. And what's left? Your name and all of its history, all of its relationships, all gone in a moment of silence. Your reference to your body or your emotions gone in a moment of silence. And what's here in this moment?
So I think what you're saying is our relationship with those who have died, we are at one with them.
I'm not speaking of those who have died. I'm only speaking of you.
Mm-hmm.
You can pull it closer so you don't have to go for it. Yeah. Those that have died have nothing to do with this moment of you being still. Really, in a moment of being still, they don't exist. And you, as you have known yourself, does not exist. And your past, as you have known it, does not exist. And your future dies. And so with no future, what's here? What do you experience?
Well, there's just being.
just being. Now, is it, well, there's just being? Or is it, really, there's just being? Then the mind, this great power that we have as human beings, great developed power that has been brainwashed in many different ways, is free to actually inquire, what is here? Who am I? Who am I if I'm not my past, and I'm not my future, and I'm not my past, and not my future? Oh, who am I without the tricks that we have developed with our extraordinarily developed minds? Who am I when my mind is naked of concept, but not naked of attention? When it's naked of concept, it is pure attention. And it is with pure attention that you inquire, that you're free to inquire. Yes, you see this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're having a big change in politics tomorrow,
Yes.
and I have a
noticed
lot
that.
of fear
Yes.
around that.
Yes, me
Of
too.
what's going to happen.
Me too.
And yeah.
It's intelligent to be fearful of changes like this. It's like fearful of a fire or fearful of a storm. It's your mind's intelligence that recognizes there's a possibility of great danger. Yes.
And I will stay present.
Yes. Oh, what a vow. That's being true. Yes, I will stay present.
Yeah.
I will not check out. I won't daydream that something is happening, is not happening. I won't use spiritual concepts to escape. I will freely be here because we are very lucky, as you know, and we need to know that in a very strong way, that we are free, relatively, extremely free, extremely privileged in that freedom. And so it behooves all of us to stay present here. So this teaching that I'm bringing you is not in contradiction to that at all. Just briefly say and then get to the gist of it. When Papaji was with Ramana Maharshi, who was his guru, and he had spent 5 years with him just being in bliss, never read a paper, never did anything, but Ramana Maharshi read the paper every day. And he said to him one day, Punja, there's great trouble in your homeland. And Papaji lived in Pakistan. He was a Hindu living in Pakistan. And he said, well, it's all a dream to me. Papaji said, that's all a dream to me. And Ramana said, if it's a dream, no matter, go there and get your relatives to safety. It was a horrible time in India. I know many of you know about it, the partition and great amount of bloodshed and really mayhem, really terrible. And Papaji went back and got his relatives all out, and then he was on the last train out of Lahore, going to Delhi. And he always had an Om tattooed on his hand because he was Hindu, and he looked in the railroad car, and it was filled with Muslims, and those Hindus and Muslims were killing each other, slaughtering each other, and he just covered his Om and rode to freedom and got out and did what he had to do in the world. He didn't use the bliss of being with his guru as an escape from the world. It was actually a source of strength. Great.
I think you answered my question with hers. I was going to ask you, what makes you move from that spot when you're sitting? And
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I don't know.
because I think if I ever got there, I'd sit there.
You think that, but if you let go of that thought, because that thought serves to not to block you from actually surrendering.
It's not really a thought, though, is it? Isn't it?
It sounded like one. You said, I think if I ever got there, I would never leave.
Yeah.
I think.
I
That's a
think,
clue.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not thinking, I'm not thinking. I think I'm not thinking.
I think I get it.
If you get it, it passes by. the
Yes,
thought.
I
And
see.
then
But
the thoughts can follow that, of course. Nothing wrong with thinking. Thinking is a great power, but it's a corruptible power.
yeah, I was moved by how you did describe sitting there. And I thought, I wouldn't move.
Well, sit there and see.
Yeah.
You know, it's true. There are people who go into deep samadhis and don't move. I
Yeah.
mean, in India, I saw somebody stretched out on the equivalent of downtown Ashland, the street, and rickshaws and cars were having to go all around him, and I had that fear. It's like, oh my God, I've come to India. You know, is that my fate? Is that what I'm working for? That's a thought that's just saying, don't go there.
Yeah.
Dangerous. You don't know what could happen. You could end up never getting up. You could end up being stupid. You could end up being not useful. All of those if you're just willing to not think. When Papaji would see people going into deep samadhi, as he did with me, as I
Yeah.
told you, he would say, come out, now tell us, what is that? You bring us news from there. Yeah. So have somebody check on you.
They do anyway.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Thank you.
It's really a good question. And just let me add that Ramana, Papaji's guru, often just sat in bliss and was not an active person. Papaji remained active in his life. He even had like a motorcycle that he would ride around. He was a military man. He was a big, active man, Rajistic kind of man. And Ramana was more sattvic. He's quiet and still, and would meditate for days, and didn't even much want people to come and ask him questions. He would like keep them away. So that is possible, and you know of that possibility. Take a chance.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I have never encountered you until
welcome.
just a few moments ago. Pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm struck in my heart, I think, by the word inquiry. And I relate to it. But I would like to talk to you a little bit about it because it doesn't seem like a mental inquiry.
That's right.
It seems like a being curiosity, innocence. Am I?
That's beautiful. That's your nature, right?
Yes.
That's how it all
Yes.
starts.
Yes.
From the birth, the moment
Yeah.
of birth, a curiosity,
Yeah.
a natural inquisitive
Right.
nature.
Right, and I feel that from you, and I feel there's a freedom in that.
Yes, there's freedom
There's
in
an
that.
engagement in that.
Yes.
Yes.
Because very quickly when we come out of the womb, we are formulated as to who we should be and what we are.
I see.
And by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, we've got it down. We can recite our names, our parents' names, our address.
From outside in.
Yes, from outside in, because there is this vulnerability, and it's for safety too. You
Yeah.
know, the more you know, the more safe you are.
Uh-huh.
And in its innocence, when it's fed into the baby, it is for safety. Of course, it's very good to know your address when you're wandering someplace. But of course, it gets corrupted by society. Or maybe corrupt is not the right word. It gets used by society to formulate you as a member of a particular society with particular values and particular prejudices that are seen as right. And at some point, you break out of that. You have broken out of that. Everyone in this room has broken out of that. You couldn't be in a place like Unity and be singing Sanskrit words and, and be in bliss unless you broke out of what you were taught you should be as a baby and a child and a preteen. Maybe teenage years you started breaking out of it. Right? Yes, you know that. And yet the source of that programming, the openness to programming, can be used. You've already used it for deprogramming.
Yes.
Yes, now you can use it for looking deeper, for really inquiring.
It's almost like continually being unshaped.
Yes,
Yes?
yes, unshaped, how
Yeah.
beautiful,
Yeah.
very clear.
Ah.
Yes, then this wisdom is natural, unshaped,
Yeah.
unnamed, unknown.
How sweet is that?
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah.
That's what we yearn for.
Yeah.
That's the homesickness that drives us to gather and to find some kind of peace in Sangha or right livelihood or searching for that. And Papaji recognized that. He got lots of Westerners who came to him, and he would say, simply be still. First and foremost, and simply be still. And then you have the capacity to ask, who am I? What is here?
What's here now?
Yes, what's now?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
excellent. Naturally here.
Thank you.
Happy to meet you.
Yeah, me too. Me too.